The Sustainable Voice, bringing you big successes from small places worldwide.
Welcome back to the Sustainable Voice. This is Ashish. Cris, hermano, good to have you back.
Hola, hermano. Thank you. It's great to see you and be here again.
Yeah, it's good to actually have you back. It seems like you're the most regular one on the show. It's one of two reasons. One, because we're so close, but two, because you're wicked smart. You know a lot about a lot, so it's good to have you on. I seem to keep coming back to you regularly because every time I come to the topic, who would know about that? Cris would know about that. Who would know about that? Even our producers had come and asked and said, "Hey, Cris is on the show a lot. Is that normal?" I said, "Yeah, he knows a lot about a lot. He seems to be the subject expert on a lot of different things. So that's why I wanted to bring him on."
Well, I appreciate your kind words, hermano.
Yeah. By the way, I have to tell you, I watched in horror, actually. So do you remember the episode we did in October about protesting in Peru? We talked about how some people are paid.
Uh-oh, yes.
That episode has gone completely viral. That's a good thing. But unfortunately, all the commentary is just filled with hate. Not for us, but for each other, because now it was recorded in October, but all the commentators are making it about current events, the current events hadn't even occurred yet. And yet all of a sudden they're making it about this. It was disappointing on the one hand, but on the plus side, I mean, a lot of it started a conversation, but it just shows you how divided that topic is.
It's controversial, so it's always
Yeah.
going to drag things like this, but it's okay. At the end, who's got the truth and the solution for all of these issues?
Yeah,
We're
the
just trying to
solutions.
think.
Exactly. Get the anger out of the way, and then we can focus on solutions that work for everybody. But when you get a chance, take a look, because I was floored. I said, "Oh my God, look here, this has happened, and it's taken a life of its own." It's a last check we had, God, we were over 30,000 climbing, but the
Wow.
commentary was one. And I remember they asked, like, should we turn the commentary off? I said, no, let people comment. We just have to step in and say we weren't talking about this. We were recording in October, but the commentary needs to happen because it's what people are saying. And it just shows you just how nobody's actually talking about the problem. All they're doing is attacking each other. It's a shame, but it's where we are. Unfortunately, you can't avoid reality. We are where we are, no matter how much we mask it.
That's true.
Yeah.
I agree with you.
Yeah. So today we're talking specifically about tipping culture, ethics, economics, and expectations. And once again, I've got you back as an expert because you're the right person to talk about this. Have you ever seen your guests when they're getting ready to tip? Do they look like they have anxiety when they're looking to tip? Do they look like they're nervous about how much they're tipping?
Certainly, it's a very common thing. Either they ask or they're hesitated, or as you said, anxious about, am I doing the right thing? Is that the right amount? Or so, of course, they don't say it, but I can sense it.
Yeah. Look, it's for me as well. I just came back from Africa, and there's anxiety, and I'm a pro at it, and there's still anxiety. So I can only imagine. And, we get asked all the time, well, what if we just prepay the gratuities or just include it? Certain companies, will include it. I mean, I'm not knocking the companies, but certain companies will just include it. But there's a problem there too, because in some countries, it doesn't get to where it's going. It gets held up in taxes. It gets held up in people's pockets. It doesn't actually reach where it's going, right? Which one do you prefer? Do you prefer when people prepay gratuities in Peru, or do you prefer if people are doing it in person? Which one do you prefer?
Mano, I appreciate the fact that you're giving me the freedom to talk about this because it's also quite sensitive for us. But I can tell you that for sure, I really like tipping face to face after whatever the service we provide, for which we work really hard and we prepared ourselves to earn that. And even if there's no tipping at all, we are still very grateful for the opportunities that are given to us and the fact that travelers are coming our way to learn about our culture and ourselves.
Yeah.
But if it's the case, I definitely like the fact of face-to-face handling straight ahead to me.
I mean, and currency. Which currency do you prefer? US dollars, euros, monopoly money? Which one do you prefer?
Lately, I've heard of PayPal being even accepted by some colleagues. I think US dollars will be the best because I mean in the personal case of myself, it's money that I put aside to save. for
Mhm.
whatever purposes. And although dollars are not our official currency, it's pretty much accepted everywhere. So it's great.
So this is interesting, because you travel a lot. So let's talk about this. In your home country, in Peru, what are the roots of tipping? I mean, any idea on where tipping started? Was it, was it? Does it date back to the time of before Homo sapiens and prehistoric periods and Paleolithic periods, or the Ice Age, or where does this start? Where's the tipping roots of tipping in tourism? If you could trace it back, do you have an idea as to where you think it started?
I think it's got to go back to the 1960s, 1970s that travelers started coming. Once there was a train track built up to Machu Picchu, and there was a, somewhat ease to get there, an easier way to get there. Therefore, there were people helping people carrying their belongings, cooking for them all along the way, or simply just giving them directions. I guess at least North American travelers, and why not? Maybe even European travelers must have started, showing some appreciation to them all. But I can
Mm,
tell you 20 years ago, it's when I started traveling abroad, specifically to the United States, and I was actually introduced to that culture of tipping. I was absolutely surprised. I've never worked for a restaurant, but I was close to it at the hotel, and I was able to see, the raise 10, 15, 18, 20, 25%. And I was blown away by that. I've never heard that. Now, ever since then, that tradition has somewhat slowly started happening here in Peru within own
okay.
locals. Exactly. I'm going to say within the past 5, 8 years. I know good friends of mine who are in the restaurant business, and they tell me, hey, I by the way, they asked me how was this service, how was the waiter, how was the food, and I said, it was superb. I even ended tipping the guy because it was great, and they were great. You're not the first. So I was like, oh, well, good. And then we start talking like, hey, because I did it because he really deserved it. He went above and beyond. I didn't even ask, and he was already, offering, and it was a great experience. For a minute, I felt like I was in the United States in a good way, which is something that I've never seen before.
So before you got to Colorado where you were working, you were obviously guiding in Peru before that as well, a little bit here and there. What was tipping like before that? Like, what
Uh,
were you expecting?
I was expecting absolutely none because actually at
Wow.
university, no one tells you, hey, by the way, you're gonna get this on top of your salary or whatever you're being paid for a
Hmm.
service. No, I don't think still even talk about it in universities right now. So when I started, I was the scored guide. So I was the one herding cats behind large groups of travelers. I was kind of practicing, getting to know the logistics and so on. And after 5, 6 days, I'll get an envelope which was about half the size of the envelope that was given to the tour leader or the guide, the main guy. But for a 18, 20-year-old guy, that was wow, that was amazing. I was the
Right
man
on.
at the university at that age.
So
But it was unexpected, but it was amazing.
but unexpected. And then when you came back, obviously, then the dynamics changed. So I guess that's the question, right? When we talk about the difference in tipping between countries, you just explained about the U.S. and it seems like it's bleeding over because here in the U.S. there's some conversation about how it's becoming excessive now. How I was just in one city, I won't name the city, but when you go to actually a restaurant, the tipping started at 25%. It was the minimum, and I just
Wow.
stopped. I said 25. I don't mind
Wow.
doing it, right? I pride myself in being a very generous tipper. I pride myself in that, the fact that I do like to appreciate service because I recognize how hard people work. But it was excessive. So in this country, there's a lot of conversation now about tipping becoming excessive. Is that something that you fear is going to bleed into Peru as well?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. Even if it's 1 or 2 soles, or whether it is 100 soles, it's always going to be appreciated and
Mhm.
welcomed. Not everybody at restaurants or hotels here in Cusco are actually expecting it, or in Peru, I'm gonna say, are expecting a gratuity. But I know because we talk about it that we're gonna work to make people happy, and maybe that will come into some sort of generosity the other way, but I don't think it's going to become a problem because it's not part of our culture, at least not just yet.
So In the countries you've traveled to, besides the States, like for example, I know you go to Europe a lot, plus your Monsters of Rock cruise that you take all over from Florida and those. Have you noticed the difference in norms? Have you noticed that there's is what have you noticed the differences there versus in Peru?
The big time, hermano. For the cruise that we go, it's a theme cruise. Actually, when we are paying for our cabin, they include it's like 300 maybe dollars per person for gratuities. So everything is taken care of. We don't have to tip waiter or whatever in the restaurant. It's all
Yeah.
taken care of. Still open for the ones who would like to tip extra. It's absolutely open, but it's part of the fee that we have to cover to get on the boat. A couple of years ago, we were in Amsterdam. It was right downtown Amsterdam, having frites, potatoes, the French
Mhm.
fries. It was a really nice restaurant, and the lady was so kind to us, and she was very excited that we came from Peru, da da da. And we ended up giving. Maybe we didn't even accept the change. We say this is for you, and she was looking at us like, why? And we
Mhm.
just look with Gabby and then turn around and then say, we probably shouldn't have done that.
Okay. So she wasn't
But
expecting it.
I mean, good surprised. She wasn't
Right.
mad or anything, but she was not expecting it at all. Then we started reading, like, you gotta think twice next time. So, but it was nothing but our way to show a little appreciation of how nice and kind she was to a couple of strangers in the middle of nowhere, eating there for 30 minutes. And she was giving us hints of where to go, what to do, where not to go, where to go, and so on. We felt like, thank you. Here's a little something for you.
So
Good.
something that I think you've touched on this, but I think we should drill down. Tipping is normalized in certain countries and not normalized in others. For example, Japan, in many cases, Japan tipping is seen as offensive. You insult them, somebody there. Not everywhere, but in most cases, if you give a tip, it's almost offensive because there's service charges. Australia, New Zealand, for a long time, tipping wasn't customary because there's service charges, but now it's starting to being asked for in little things. And I think you just touched on it. Is it that, for example, that lady in Amsterdam, because you tipped her, do you think she now has it where she is starting to become trained to ask for it or to expect it now because of that? Does her behavior change, or how would you say that tipping become normalized in the country?
Well, you gotta know. Now I'm also learning about it. Like I do work for some European travelers, not too often, but I mean they're super nice. They even had me stay in their places in Belgium, in Denmark. I'm so grateful for that. But they never tip a single sol. Although
Hmm.
they took care of my meals while we were touring. We extended the tour. They made sure I was well taken care of. If they wanted a beer, they will share a beer with me or a coffee or whatever. Snacking, they will always share. Not that nor other countries or North Americans wouldn't do. It's just a slightly different. So I guess this lady in Amsterdam will be like knowing exactly maybe South Americans or maybe Americans in general will show a little appreciation if I offer these type of things. If there's some say Japanese people, why would I mind? I will just get the same, the plain service, good, and then so on. But I don't necessarily believe this will be a big change on her behavior.
Okay. I mean, but I mean, so how do you think, like, for example, in Peru, how did tipping become normalized? How did it become accepted? Was it people just starting to now saying, huh, okay, yeah, this, here, like, for example, in the US, what used to be 15% now is 20. 20 is becoming 22. 22 is becoming 25. 25 is becoming 30. Is there a behavior being learned? Is it a Darwin's theory of evolution in work? Is there an adaptation? Where do you think tipping gets normalized?
I think it's getting from the travelers, from the influences from abroad that we're getting. Don't get me wrong. You go to Ancash, to Callejón de Huaylas in a little town called, say, Yungay, and you go to a restaurant.
Mhm.
They won't ask for a service fee. They won't ask for a tip. And they won't be expecting a tip, whether it comes from a foreigner or for a local. But when
Mhm.
tourists start coming, then people will get it as part of what it is. Now, in cities like
Mm.
Lima or Cusco, for instance, even in local places for locals are already asking you hey, would you like to add a little extra tip for, before you pay? That happened to me a week ago in Lima, in a super local place, not a single traveler. I was like, well, sure, because we were thinking about leaving something because she did a great job with 15 people in the table. And she already said, it's just sure, go ahead and, put it on the bill. But it's Lima. And just like Cusco and perhaps
Right.
Arequipa, I don't know, maybe in Chachapoyas, because more travelers are coming, they're bringing the whole tradition in. See what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
think that's
So
where it's
it
coming
makes
from.
sense. Like, yeah, I think you're spot on. I think it is. It's because Australia, New Zealand, at some point, at one point, I remember when my first visit in 2003, it wasn't customary. I actually got turned away 3 times. Like, no, no, you don't need to. You don't need to. And then now all of a sudden, like last visit, I went to a restaurant, and there was a line there for it. So I think it is very much that foreigners are coming in like, huh, okay, well, we'll ask, maybe they will. So this, okay, so this then leads to a very important part of the etiquette, right? Which is the ethics part of it. What we call the power imbalance between the traveler and the tourist, or the patron and the service worker. Is it, and maybe this happened to you when you were in Colorado or anywhere else, but is it like just because you're the patron, the one tipping, that you get to basically you're hovering over the service worker, like you're the dominant one in control, the alpha? How does the balance of respect still stay?
I remember going for a meal with Gavi on our anniversary at a fine dining restaurant at the hotel that we were working for. Did we ask for how do you say, a discount? No. Did we tip our friend who was working there? Absolutely, because we really appreciate what they were doing for us. And we never felt like we were superior than them. To the point that I have gotten, because many of my friends are doing it, asked me before, Chris, why are you tipping? What do you think you come from North America? And like, you're getting very crazy traditions, they said to me. But I said, hey, it's my way to appreciate it. And I'm not giving them 100 soles. I'm giving them few soles that I'm pretty sure he's going to appreciate, because when he gets out of the restaurant late, he's got a way to take care of his taxi back home to take care of their family. And, it's just a way to appreciate. Um, I never felt superior or anything like that. It's just now, if the service to me here in Cusco or Peru, it's like the waiter come and that barely, just handles you the menu and just come back, take your and leaves, why would I do
Right.
it? I'll thank them, but I
Yeah,
don't necessarily feel
it's
the fact
interesting.
that I'm superior.
Right. And and I think that's interesting because I've been in situations where I've watched people behave like they're superior. I've watched people behave like they're superior. Have you ever had somebody behave that way, whether it's a client, whether you were a restaurant, but because they were the patron, because they were the one tipping, like they acted like they had won over you, or that they were higher than you? Have you ever had that experience?
Maybe, hermano, honestly, maybe, but I just didn't take it personally. And like, if they were, say, taking care of the
Yeah.
bill or giving me an extra tip, I'm like, well, thank you. I did
Right.
what I was assigned for, and I truly hope you enjoy what I have done for you. And if there's a little extra for
Mhm.
me, well, thank you. Like, with my heart. But if they ever, did some sort of gesture like, being the boss, I never take it personally, honestly. But
No,
maybe.
yeah, and I don't think you would. I have a friend of mine who's a guide in the Masai Mara, and he was telling me that he didn't take it personally, but there was somebody who was there like, hey, if you can show us this animal, there's an extra X amount in it for you. And he didn't take it personally, but I kind of look at it, like, I cringe. I go, that's not. Don't demean his job to that. He's a naturalist by college degree. He's choosing to do this. Your background's in archaeology. For you, being a guide is a career path. It was a choice. It's not something that you have to do. You love doing it. And I just remember, yeah, it's just like you. He didn't take it personally. But have you ever wanted to tell somebody like, hey, I know you're here to enjoy. I'm not taking it personally, but please don't dangle that over my head like it's some sort of carrot. Have you ever had to have that conversation with somebody?
Luckily, no, hermano. Now that you made me remember, perhaps when joking around, somebody said a lot, Chris, don't do that. You hurting your tip, but it's just for fun. I take it just for fun, because
Yeah,
we're doing something.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But but I never felt it like, it was like, you make sure there's no rain in Machu Picchu, otherwise your tip is gone or something like that.
Yeah, that's separate. That's a joke. But I think, do you think a power imbalance exists? Do you think there's one that exists? Like if in your travels overseas, even when you're working in the States, especially where you were in a part of the States where there's the upper echelon of society, as you'd call them, right? As they would be the patrons there, the ultra high net worth, the ones who drink their champagne with the pinky up in the air and whatnot, and have the fake laugh down to a science. Did those guys have have you noticed a power imbalance, or do you think one exists even subconsciously?
I think yes. The majority of the guests that I happened to say worked closer back in Colorado, they were absolutely nice. Whether they came from Mexico, New York, very few from Europe. The majority from where the United States. They were very very nice. As a matter of fact, you just made me remember. I don't recall the name, but it was supposed to be a senator in government at the moment. This is 15 years ago. And he was
Hmm.
apparently a regular guest at the hotel, so he come for Christmas with the family and so on. I don't know, Mr. Simpson, for instance, right? And everybody said, Chris, don't you forget in the morning, as soon as he comes out of the elevator at the lobby, just make sure you greet him by the name. And I said, well, we do it with all of our guests. No, but make sure you do it. Like, sure. So there he comes, right? Good morning, Mr. Simpson. It's good to see you. Coffee's ready around the corner. There he comes. Oh, good morning. He shakes my hand and gives me $100 bill. I was like,
Oh, that's why.
I'm at the front desk, and I'm not exaggerating. There he goes around the corner, and of course,
Yeah.
the lady, the hostess at the restaurant grill, of course, everybody knows it. Oh, good morning, Mr. Simpson. Oh, here it is, $100,
Wow.
$100, $100. I'm not exaggerating. He was a super super nice gentleman. I don't think he's got anything, like power imbalance, but that was
No, he
absolutely
was.
amazing for me.
That's like the scene from Home Alone, right? Where Macaulay Culkin's character, by the way, God rest Catherine O'Hara. She just passed at the time he was recording. God rest her soul. But yeah, it's like the scene from Home Alone, the hotel in New York. There's a shiny 100 in it for you, or whatever the case. Uh, yeah, you know what? It's interesting. So I actually had this experience where there was a power imbalance. So I was leading a group, and it was somewhere in Africa. I was leading a group, and just I was there, and I guess some of the group didn't know that I was not a guide. I was there to help, and came over at the end and says, there could have been more in it for you, but this. And I kind of just stopped and looked and said, well, thank you for letting me know that I suck at my job. Beyond that, I don't actually expect this. I don't need this. Please give it to somebody else. And if you can't find somebody else, and donate it to charity. But and again, I'm with you. I don't think there's
Wow,
a power balance, but I think subconsciously, I think the wrong person might take it that way, or might
exactly.
try to use it that way, right? So there's that. And I do have a genuine concern about some of the new generation of travelers, right? I'm not knocking a generation. I've got a Gen Z and a Gen Alpha in the house, right? So I'm not knocking them. They're wickedly smart, right? Absolutely brilliant minds. But I do have a concern about their sense of entitlement. I do have a concern about that generation's level of entitlement. Not all, again, not all, but you have two things happening: a level of entitlement and a shortening attention span. They learn etiquette from social media, watching the same platforms this episode is going to be on. So I do have a concern about that. You have two really cool nephews, right? That you hang out with. Do you
I
have
got the
concerns when they become?
six.
You got the six exactly. Do you have concerns when they become adults that that's going to be something that they have to deal with?
I mean, that's where uncles come into. I think Gabby and myself see it from a different perspective since we don't have kids. And in trips like the one last week, we took them for over 15 days with us only. We openly talked to them about various topics. And we
Hmm.
could certainly notice that my brother, my sister, my brother-in-law, my sister-in-law are doing an absolutely great job. It cannot be perfect. So that's where we come and, do a little tweaks and like adjustments here and there. And I think it's just a matter of education from home, from parents, from family that will
Hmm.
ensure, a proper way of living, whether in order for them not to become that, macho man or to become less by somebody, just,
Right.
who you are. So I think it's that education, but as you say, it's a new generation. I honestly don't know how is it going to be in the next 5, 10 years? Things are changing
Sure.
brutally.
They're changing a lot. Okay, so this then, as we transition to the next section, the next topic part, the next part of this, as a guide, you touched on this. How much do you rely on tips? Do you need it to put food on the table, or is it uh, a bonus for you? And are your friends that you know that are guides the same?
Honestly, hermano, it's always welcome. I honestly don't necessarily count on the fact that I am going to get a juicy gratuity from this group that I'm going to be for 8 days, for instance. But whatever it comes is absolutely welcome. But hey, we're 10 years successfully married and we are taking care of, yes, few cats, but it's not like some others that are taking care of a number of kids and a big family, and there's university coming and so on. So I think
Mhm.
there's a big difference for a vast majority of colleagues of mine that gratuities comes in strongly to support their needs.
Yeah.
So it is definitely way more than a bonus and a plus on top of our income.
Yeah, this is an interesting point because I mean you're spot on. Different people have it different ways. Different guides rely on different ways. I know in Egypt, for example, it's the same thing. The guides, the Egyptologists who have studied their craft, and obviously with guides, the better you are at your craft, the more in demand you're going to be. The more in demand you're going to be, the more you can command. Somebody who's just starting out as a guide for 2 months versus you as seasoned as you are and as expert as you are and as intelligent as you are and as good as you are, you're going to be on a different level than a brand new guide, right? In terms of what you command. Would you say that level exists in Peru, right?
Certainly, yes. I think experience comes in and is the one that is making big difference within the newer generations in what we're doing. So it's not something that we don't
Yeah.
necessarily are afraid of what's coming up in the time, but I think experience it's big for sure everywhere.
Yeah, and it's the same thing with other countries like Egypt, other places, right? It's the same thing, right? If you're an Egyptologist, you're versus a local guide. There's the level of respect, your education kicks in, everything kicks in. It's interesting because there's so many articles in America right now talking about how college degrees maybe aren't required, that advanced degree and that fancy school maybe isn't as important now. But when you break it down to somebody, for example, who's a guide, that education actually plays vital, not just experience, but it actually plays absolutely vital. If you're an Egyptologist in Egypt who's got a degree, a 4-year degree in Egyptology, if you're a naturalist in the Galapagos that has a 4-year degree in being a naturalist, or I know a guide, for example, a friend of mine who's a guide in Botswana who's got the equivalent of a PhD in anthropology. Doesn't have the PhD, but the education is there. I think when it comes to your field, would you say that education aspect of it is still paramount? No matter what society is saying about the value of education, in your field, education still counts more than ever.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power. Doesn't necessarily have to be reflected on your documentations and your diplomas, but it's when you talk face to face that you can tell your whole background, and make the difference
Yeah,
with others. So yes,
yeah,
it's definitely
100%.
important. So going back to the kids and newer generations, I always try to tell the newer generations, go get a degree, go get educated, go read a book, look for your purpose in life and whatever you are really passionate on, and go and be the greatest at it. Don't let anybody held you down. Just go for it.
In your eyes, and this deals with obviously, in your eyes, is there a correlation that the higher the level of education, the higher the level of experience, the more you can command, the less reliant you are on gratuities as to pay your bills versus the inverse? Is that a true statement that the more educated you are, the more experience you have, the more intellectual you are, the more popular you are, the more dependable you are, and everything else, right? Does that then mean that yes, the gratuities are appreciated, but they're not keeping you from starvation?
Hermano, we are in a very corrupted society. So whether
Hmm.
you're the most intellectual you could be, there will always be a way for anyone to get on the position that someone has been working really hard to get to, which is really
Wow.
unfair. And I see it on daily basis. But then it comes, the love for myself. I know who I am, and if they get on that position, well, it's their problem. It may not last for a long time, but here I am is getting stronger.
There you go.
No,
There you go.
definitely, definitely gratuities will always come I mean, very, very helpful for all of us. It doesn't matter whether we have a family to support or not. It comes in pretty handy.
So this is this is it. I'm glad you said that because that's actually I've heard that now from 7 different people in 6 different countries saying that there are people who the minute tourism takes off, there are people who just show up tomorrow. We've seen them ourselves at Machu Picchu. They just all of a sudden, oh, we're a guide too. And then they get into this corrupt system, and it happens in other countries as well. There's a corrupt system, and they pretend to be something that they're not. And I mean, if you're a visitor, you're coming there. The visitor who just wants to stamp in their passport, you could tell them whatever they wanted. You could tell them whatever you wanted. How do they know right from wrong? Whereas a traveler who is coming and really seeking knowledge is going to want to know answers. They're going to actually do research, and they're going to want insight. They're going to expect more from you. So I think you're spot on there that it is. Yeah, the gratuities are appreciated, but the inverse, but the flip side of that is that you still also have to you have to contend with these people who will wake up tomorrow and say, oh, I'll be a guide too, because there's enough people, and they won't last long, but they'll try to enter into a corrupt system. And that's not just here. It's in Galapagos, it's in Egypt, it's in Kenya, it's everywhere. That's an issue. And I think what you said is exactly right. You know who you are, you love what you do. And if that passion, that pride for what you do is central, that drives everything else. Everything else can be taken care of, but you can't teach passion.
Correct, hermano. You said it right, and that is the reason I'm still standing here.
So let's look at it a different way. So if we're talking about your salary versus the pricing of a tip of a journey versus tipping, you've seen those. It doesn't matter where you are. There's a tour price that just seems way too good to be true. It's way too low. I was involved in an article for a major publication in Kenya that talked about a cheetah kill in Kenya, and the article talked about how there's just undue pressure on these guides who make nothing to put on a show. And so this cheetah made a kill, and these vehicles went just storming towards the cheetah, rounded the cheetah like it was 50 to 80, were honking their horns and everything else. It was disgusting. And so the drivers got villainized. But then when you step back, but the article did a great job, and I was proud to be associated with it, to be involved in it and interviewed for it. The article did a great job talking about the fact that these drivers have a lot of pressure. These driver guides have a lot of pressure put on them to put on a show, because for them, there isn't much of a salary. The tip is basically the majority part of their salary. So if we bring that back to this, the idea, when you see a tour, it doesn't matter where it is, and that price is just way too low, does that affect your income, or is it taken somewhere else? Where does that discount, or where does that money come from, or where does it happen?
Well, we all belong to different associations of professional tour guides or tour leaders here in Peru, depending on the city which you are, and there are designated already prices or rates for the many hours, or whether it's just a regular excursion, or it's hiking, or it had to be camping overnight. Da, da, da. So the rates are there, although I personally believe that they should be increased, because if you compare it with our neighbors sitting in Lima, they got double to triple the rates of us, and they're doing, we're doing the same thing. Why is it so different? It's something that I just can't understand. Anyway, I think this could be improving. I mean, the fact that our salaries could still get better, because everything is becoming more and more expensive. But drivers, for instance, could easily be, I'm not saying everybody, but could be, say, how do you say, exploded? I mean, like too much work. Exploited. There we go. Exploited. Now, I'm not saying everybody, but there could be some seasons in a year, like, okay, you could do this, and then when you're ready, go to the other side, and then they're like 12 hours driving here and there, not long distances, but we are humans, so they also rely on a little extra tip, because they are getting paid per month and not by service that they're doing, like what as a guide I'm doing. So it's just a very interesting topic of how salaries could be affected, because tipping is not, as I said, part of our cultures. It depends of the service that is being provided. It's depending of the career that the person has been given and prepared for. But it doesn't matter, mano. In a country like Peru, tipping will always be absolutely appreciated, and I can guarantee it's never going to be insulting, whether it's, as I said, one sol or $1 million. It's always going to be appreciated.
So you're saying that And I think I agree with you that the pricing of tours, I know they get expensive, but based on the number of people, having a high price for travel isn't necessarily a bad thing. As long as it's done the right way, meaning there's not profiteering involved, right? I mean, again, I take that aside, right? So as long as companies aren't price gouging and profiteering of it, but in the general philosophy, what you're saying is that having a higher tour price that then leads directly to a higher tip amount, a higher salary amount for you, a higher salary for a driver, that's a good thing.
Well, there is a slight difference within some tour agencies and others. I mean, it varies minimum, but for many it could be a big difference. For
Mhm,
instance, there is the famous private tours here in Cusco, as well as the shared tours on which,
mhm,
random travelers come and hop out on a bus with 15 other travelers and go on a full day tour to the Sacred Valley. And they
mhm,
promise them the moon. They tell them you're going to see 15 different sites. You're going to see this and the other and the other, and you're going to have lunch. Da, 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 da. But when I see them on daily basis, they have their guests. Okay, my name is Chris. You have 10 minutes. Go take your picture and then ready to hop in. And then they make sure they stop in shops for more than an
mhm,
hour because by the fact of just purchasing, they get a little commission. My
mhm.
understanding is that some even colleagues of mine are not getting a salary. They're living out of the commissions that they collect on different places. And I just can
Wow.
understand. Well, now,
Wow.
but where I'm going with this is that that traveler is invested a very, very, let's say, $8. So, oh wow, $8 for a
Mhm.
Sacred Valley tour? I'm on it. But what are you getting? There's something
Right.
that I really,
Right.
really, really hate in the Peruvian culture. For the speaking Spanish or the Peruvians out there will know exactly what I'm saying. I like bueno, bonito y barato. The triple B, B as in boy, right? Bueno, bonito, barato. So good, nice, and cheap. And I hate it. I hate when they come to me and say, "Hey, Chris, can you recommend us a
Mhm.
hotel that has a triple B's? Oh, by the way, I'm in a honeymoon trip." I'm like, "Really? Are you looking for this?" So, okay, go
Yeah.
look for that, and then know what you're gonna get.
Right.
So,
Right. No,
if some
you're
travel
spot on.
companies have a higher rate, is because they have not only the proper professionals behind, not only like you behind the computer taking care of all of the itineraries, but a whole crew behind the one operating the tours, purchasing, excuse me, reservations, and then the ones who get to execute the plan are tour professionals. So
Mhm.
that, I think that's where the big
Right.
difference comes in.
I think you're spot on. I mean, and that's exactly what you've nailed it. So somebody, if you are charging more, there has to be a clear path as to where it's going, right? Where that money's going, how it's supporting. I remember in Morocco years ago, I had just gone by myself and I was exploring. It was one of my first visits. I've been now, obviously, 20 plus times. And one of the things that disturbed me a lot was the fact that the company, it wasn't a company I was associated with, but it was just random company I picked up there. I wanted to learn. And they were cutting corners by not providing a hotel room for the driver. So the guide got one, but the driver didn't get one. The driver had to sleep in the car. And in Morocco, you have long drives. You got 8-hour drives, 10-hour drives. This is nature of it. So they weren't providing they were providing a very meager salary. And then, as you said, tips, and then sleep in the car. So where do you shower? Where's hygiene? Where do you brush your teeth? Where do you look after yourself? Where do you clean up? Where do you freshen up? And I think part of it is what I would say, and I agree with you, is that there has to be a level of respect. This is a profession, and there has to be a level of respect that comes with it. And as long as it's treated like a profession, everything else takes care of itself. I actually, there's a restaurant here where I live that I love what they did. I found it just before the holidays, and I love what they wrote. So it was a restaurant that basically had, and in the U.S., tipping culture is normal, but as I mentioned to you, in some cases, some parts of the U.S., it's starting to get out of hand. There's a lot of big debate about this. So they put a note on the table that said X% is added to your check already. I think it was like 10%. Your server is paid in this way. That 10% is a commission that's going to them because they were serving you and whatnot. There'll be a line item on or line on your receipt to add more should you wish, but please know 10% is already included. I really like that. They were not speaking for me, so they weren't assuming 18, 20, 25, 30, whatever it was. 10%'s there. Please add, if you want to, add something else. Here's where that 10% goes. I think that was brilliant for a restaurant to basically say, look, this is our model. This is how we work. And even said, we're a family. We write this because we're a family. We pool everything together. We work together to look after you, and whatever the case. And I think that level of transparency when it comes to gratuities is what's missing in a lot of places.
Mhm.
What say you?
I mean, I've seen it everywhere. Even when I was working in Colorado, there was tipping on credit cards and there was tipping cash. If you were at a
Hmm.
bar, because my sister was doing that, and then you all had to be collected at the end of the night. They'll split it
Hmm.
up among servers, runners, and bussers, I believe, something like that. So there was also
Hmm.
a hierarchy right there. But there was always someone who didn't quite put that gratuity in the big container that you were supposed to. So it was
Put it in the
quite
pocket.
unfair. Exactly. In the case of us, I have my colleague partners sitting next to me when we're driving, the drivers, as absolutely important part of our crew because they are making sure they're driving us and taking us safely to one and the other side. And as you said,
Right.
it's not a 30-minute ride, and the bumpy rides and they could be really good, but then you don't know how the other drivers are going to be.
Right.
I'm not saying that driving and it's crazy here, but you never know. So
Right.
I always try to also place them in a really important spot for our travelers, that they also deserve um, a recognition, because although some of them they don't even speak some English, some do better than the others, but they deserve, and they have a family to support.
So this actually brings me to the next point, the separation, like tipping when it supports communities versus when it's masking an issue. Like for example, the corruption where somebody could wake up tomorrow and be a guy and be on the same level as somebody like you who's experienced. Is it how do you separate where tipping is truly supporting a family or a community? And I ask this because I remember during the Ebola crisis in Africa, I had written a bunch of articles that got picked up by major publications that talked about the amount of people that are supported by one salary in the continent, in the safari sections of it, and what it meant, and what those gratuities and what that tour income meant for that family. In this case, I guess is the question for you is how do you know when tipping is truly supporting a community or a family, or meaning it's going directly where it's sourced versus covering up some systemic issues in that society?
I guess you gotta truly know who the gratuity is being given to.
Hmm.
We take some of our travelers to very rural communities to see the real, Peruvian mountain way of living and so on. And our travelers are often very, very generous to ask me, like, who do I give to? And there's not only a family, there's plenty. So I often go to say the leader, and I ask them, hey, I know, I know you, and they want to do this for you, so make sure you split it accordingly. And everybody comes in and look at me in the eye like, you know us, you you don't need to say this. We appreciate it, but it's going to the right purpose, and don't you worry.
Right.
And yes, next time I go, I see, say, the kids with better sandals, or there's a nicer door in the, not only the leaders but everybody's homes. I see improvements.
Right.
So I think
Right.
it's about knowing who you're giving the money to, because you cannot tell
That's
they
great.
all are the same.
So, okay, if knowing who you're giving to, so here's a question for you. You've been to countries, and I have too, where you ask somebody there, well, how does tipping work? Oh, no, it's give whatever you want to. You're it's almost like they're afraid to talk about it. So that begs the question: is tipping really optional? If someone's depending on it, is it really optional? I mean, we know it's like, oh, it's at your discretion, it's optional. Is it truly optional, or is it expected? I know it depends on the country. But if we, in the case of Peru, I know everything we said, oh, it's, you've seen them, you and I both seen them. Oh, it's tipping is at your discretion, it's optional, it's not mandatory. Is it really optional, or is it expected?
It's a tricky question, hermano, because as I said, it's still not part of our culture. People
Right.
will certainly expect it, but if there's no gratuity at all, you're not going to get an evil eye, like, get out of my house. No, people may like, maybe I need to improve something, may say, for next time,
Right.
right? But I think we're getting paid fair wages, could be better, but
Right.
it's not going to be insulting if it's optional. As I always learn from my mentors, tipping is on volunteer basis.
Is it okay to talk about it? Is it okay to if I mean, you and I have talked about it when we're traveling together, but is it okay for a traveler to talk to you and say, hey, what kind of amounts should I be looking at? I mean, guidelines exist. Everybody has a guideline, but is it okay for a traveler to bring it up with you and say, this is what I'm thinking. Is it okay?
It could be a little uncomfortable because that's what I
Yeah.
was saying earlier. When I learn seeing in the bills, there's a 10, 15, 18, 20, 25%. Now you say, we don't have
Right.
such. So what if I tell you 50%?
Right.
If you're my guest, I tell you, oh,
Right.
you should do 50%, but 50%
Right. Right.
of what I spent.
Of
But
what?
how much should I give you? Should I give $100 to the guy for 5 days? No, you should give 1,000 US. So
Right.
it's interesting what you also said. It almost felt like we are afraid to talk about it. It's
Right.
interesting that that's how you see it. It's not that we're afraid. It's I guess we just don't want to be seen as we're taking advantage of your generosity because it is not
Yeah.
part of our culture. I don't have the base to tell you percentages.
So, and that's okay. So, and that I think is the root of this is that there has to be earnestness, right? So, you have to be earnest. So, like, for example, I love the way you just put that. Like, we don't want to take advantage of generosity. It's not that we're scared to talk about it, but we don't want to feel like we're taking advantage of it. The inverse of that is also true, right? So, I remember I was in a taxi in Las Vegas and there was a driver who was there. I was sitting in the front, and first time in my life, I felt uncomfortable in a taxi. I was just taking out some cash from my pocket, and I was just doing it to put in my wallet. And he saw me taking the cash out, and he leans over and he goes, "So you're not going to be tipping me, are you?" He goes, "I know your type." I didn't say anything. I was sitting right next to him in the front, all right. And so was he going to basically just throw me out of the car right there? I had my wife in the back, I had my friends in the back, the kids weren't born yet. I remember him just saying, "Oh, I guess you're not going to tip me then, are you?" And that's when that earnestness gets violated, that's where this conversation becomes an issue, because then it goes back to the earlier point that then the tipping is actually masking a systemic issue. When you go to restaurants and the 18% or 20% is already added in, yeah, it's convenient. But what if the service wasn't good? What if you wanted to give more? And I remember my late father would always talk about that. If it was parties of 6 or 8 or 10, I get, but it was like three of us and it's already there. My father-in-law would contend it. And he would go to say, please call the manager over. And he would tell the manager, and he would, and I actually agreed with him. He said, and I was young, but I agreed with what he said. He said, you put 18% on my bill automatically without asking me if I was happy with the service or not. And he said, what if I wanted to give 20 or 30 or 25? You took that right away from me. Why did you do that? For larger parties, I understand. And he was exactly right. And I think that's what you just said right there. You have to be in earnest, right? We don't want to take advantage of your generosity. And I think that's where it comes in. If it's, yes, as you said, it is for a lot of people, as we uncovered, it does go towards paying their bills, no matter how much they make. They might have 3 families to support. In the continent of Africa, there's at least 6 people that live off of one salary, or what, in like gratuity and whatnot. In the countries in Africa, if you go into other parts of South America, you go to some of the more lesser developed countries that are new to tourism, countries that have just started to shape up after domestic violence, civil disturbance and civil wars and whatnot, and shaping up, and tourism is new for them. I remember when Colombia first started, this was a major thing. Like, okay, we got to help these people get on their feet. Venezuela is going to be the same thing once tourism opens up there at some point. But I think that's once that earnestness that you're talking about gets violated, that's where this shifts from a community support and ethical support to systemic covering systemic issues. Would you agree with that?
Yes, yes, definitely. As I said it also earlier, I did start tipping, for instance, in my own society when I really see that there's people working really hard, not only the one that is cooking really hot out there, the cook inside the kitchen, but also me serving and
Right.
how they approach to you, and same with the guides and so on. You gotta earn it. I think
Right.
I think that's where it comes. I do what I'm assigned to do, and I do it the best I can, and I try to go, above and beyond with it. And if you think
Which I've seen
it's
firsthand.
gracias, if you think it's proper to, thank you. And if you think it's not, it was okay. Well, I'm still giving my best to it, and I'm improving on
Right.
daily basis, and it's not going to change my behavior or the way I do things.
Well, and this is I'll get a note sometimes from a colleague in a different country and say, hey, the cruise ship or the river cruise or the hotel just called and said, this person didn't leave a gratuity. This person didn't leave a gratuity. And I would stop and say, I'm sorry to hear that. I've given them a specific guideline that's very generous on what to use. But what would you have me do? And I would ask him, please tell me what you would have me do, and I'll be happy to do it. And one person was like, well, can we reach out to them and ask them for a gratuity? I said, absolutely not. That's just unbecoming. Absolutely not. Right? It's still there. And that goes back to, if it is optional, then it remains optional. And if they didn't leave it, okay, I'm sad they didn't leave it. I'm upset they didn't leave it. But free will is still free will. And if it's not optional, then then include it. If it's not optional and you expect it, then include it. Then find a way to include it. Then find a way to make it so that that conversation doesn't occur. Because I think you've hit the nail on the head. The conversation gets uncomfortable not because, and if it's in earnest, it's not because you're afraid to talk about gratuity amounts. It's because you don't want to be seen as taking advantage of somebody's generosity, because it is in Peru, in the case of Peru, it is truly optional. There are other countries in the world where they say it's optional, but it's not. It's almost like they get offended. I remember there's a country in Asia that I did leave a gratuity, and somebody I was traveling with did not leave a gratuity. He flipped her off. The hotel
Wow.
worker looks at her and says, "I didn't get a gratuity," and just flipped her off right there. And I just looked at him and
Wow.
I said, "That's where we are." And he said, "Yeah, she didn't leave anything for me. I don't work for free." I said, "I'm sorry you feel that way." And this was a country it was disappointing, right? And this was a country I've been to many times. And I said, if you feel that strongly about it, then why don't you talk to your superiors about just including it? Well, it's not, that's not, and he goes, well, no, it is still at the traveler's discretion. Okay, if it's at their discretion and they chose not to do it for whatever means, I didn't impede them from doing it. But if it's whatever means they chose not to do it, they forgot, they this, was you flipping them off and insulting them really the best course of action? Now you've pretty much guaranteed not only that they're not going to give you anything, but they're going to tell 10 other people how you behaved. And whether it's you or somebody else in your post the next time for the next traveler, they're going to all know that this is how you behave, and they expect and they think everybody behaves the same way. So I think that comes back to what you said earlier. And it leads to the next point, which is about emotional labor. The travel industry, tourism as a whole, is emotional, right? It's emotional labor. It's not a 9-to-5 job where you're punching numbers in a calculator all day long. There's passion and emotion in what you do every day. And the more involved your clients are, the more engaged you are. The more energy they bring, the more energy you feed off of. Is that's fair to say?
Yes, absolutely. I 100% agree.
Yeah. And the inverse of that, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
So they got to feel that. They got to feel that passion that is given to them, because it's not all about just selling you a package, like, selling you out the moon, but then when it's executed, you really get the sense and the real experience of what's a
Right.
real destination like, with the ones that are passionate and know about it. So
Right. Right.
if
And by the way, I want to just say real quick, for those of you that are listening, I know this is a longer episode than normal, but this is a topic that's been needed to be covered for a while. So this is one that, it needs to be talked about, because the inverse of that, if it's not that emotional labor, then it's like gratitude pressure, right? That person who flipped off the traveler because she didn't leave a gratuity. And it's basically this expectation. So that's where the passion's not there. If that's the case, then I mean, there's economic circumstances, I understand. However, there has to be a reason why you're doing this. How, we talked about this. Are there any tips you have for how the system of tipping can be done better? Is there any pointers you can give to travelers as to what they should think, what they should look at, what they should feel, what kind of conversations they should be having?
I've been approached by many travel companies as well as travelers on trying to get a certain amount of what is it going to be, whether it's a 4 hour, a 8 hour trip, or is it a full day, is it a hike, is it a family, da da da. I think just knowing the fact that, especially North American travelers, that are the ones that I get to work with the most, are the most generous out of them all when thinking about tipping. I'm going to say just focus on the passion, the knowledge that the services in general are provided by guides, by drivers, by hotels, by restaurants, and just don't be afraid of show your generosity to them. Know that
Right.
a dollar is 3 times our currency. $1 is 3 soles, so it's already great income for us. So I think based on the effort and the passion that the service has been put together, don't be afraid of adding a little extra tip into to the service.
That's actually a really good takeaway. That's a very good takeaway. I mean, there are countries where $1 is 13,000 or 14,000 of a local currency. And so there's scales, and you have to remember those scales. So, I mean, like, For example, my company does give a pretty extensive guide, and it's a pretty generous one as to what people should do, but it's a loose guide. And I think if you see somebody who is not showing passion and is just there, and there's an expectation for a gratuity, requesting a gratuity and needing one to live is two separate things. But becoming offensive when you don't get one is a very different thing altogether. But knowing that scale, I think that's a very good takeaway. What's another takeaway that you could think of that the travelers should have, or something that could help make this easier for them?
At least in Peru, where tipping is optional, there's no percentages or everything um, established. I think that's it, hermano. Just the fact of um knowing what you've been given for what you versus what you're expecting,
Yeah.
it could be a way to show the one providing the service. Perhaps it's a opportunity for you to improve what you just have done. If I just gave you $1
Mhm.
versus $100, maybe $100 were like, man, great job, you're doing amazing, keep that up. Or here's $1, maybe they'll feel like, yeah, I didn't sleep well last night. I was tired. Yeah, I could have done better.
Mhm.
It could be a way to tell people also without telling them straight, you've done great, or you need to improve a little something.
Yeah,
I don't know. It could be
that's a very
also,
good point. No, that's a
but that's
solid
here in
point.
Peru.
Very solid point.
But that's here in
No,
Peru,
but
though.
I will tell you. So one of my mentors had told me this, and I do this every time I go somewhere, even if it's a country I've been to before that I know, but if a country I've never been to before, I look at the economic condition of the country, right? What's their foreign currency crisis? Do they have a foreign currency issue? Are they short on, do they have debt issues? Do they have, how's their economy? Are they in a recession, depression, stagnation, stagflation, whatever? How are they doing economically? Are they in a, are they in a depressed state, or are they, are they growing and prospering? That will say a lot as well as to how far the gratuity goes, right? So, for example, one particular country, when I went the first time, they were just a few years removed from a civil war, so they were just starting out clearly. And I remember knowing that I gave the gratuity to the guide, he started crying. He said, "You have no idea how much this means. Thank you for the opportunity to do this. There were times in the last 10 years where I didn't think being a guide was even going to be possible." So I think for me, the key takeaway is just do a quick snapshot. There's some great resources online. Just a snapshot of recent. The way I would Google it or research it is just recent economic news for country X, and just let it come up. If it's a foreign currency crisis, this, that, we know the dollar, we've established the US dollar is going to be what you want to give, but this will give you an idea as to daily life is like for ordinary citizens in that country. And that'll then tell you how much your gratuity is going to mean. And then you can decide from there what the scale should be. Don't just look at the number and say, I should give this much per day and that much. Take a look at this. I remember when we were together in Peru, I said that to the group that I had brought that we were together with. I said, look, you're here while this president is being impeached. We are now on our seventh president in 6 years. And so here's the state of the economy. Here's the state of the country. And so as the gratuities that we're giving, here's what they mean. And it opened up a bunch of light bulbs. So my key takeaway is just take a look at the economic condition, the economic state of that country to know what that money means. Do they actually need your money? More than likely it's yes, but do they need it and what for? So that's there. Chris, I can't thank you enough. This
No, hermano, thank you for those very last words you said. To you. You just open a complete different perspective of seeing what is the tipping culture to me, because I'm often the one who is receiving this, and I'm getting the whole
yeah,
idea from the ones that are often are doing this on daily basis. I really, really appreciate the fact that you put all of this together and that everybody is thinking ahead to take care of the
yeah.
country, the people, the culture that you're visiting, and to leave something. I really, really appreciate that. You just made me look at that in a different perspective. The one that I should be thinking, it's
There you go.
me to you and everybody, because yes, as I said, tipping is a new culture to Peru, and it will always be welcome. Don't be afraid to give
Mhm.
as much as you think is it's needed. As far as we've done, a good job and took great care of you, which is of course going to be always the case.
Absolutely. More than a sign of generosity, it's a sign of respect. Is look them in the eye. I always make it a point. I always look that person in the eye because it is a sign of respect. It's not a dirty word. It's a sign of respect, and it counts for something. So I cannot thank you enough. This was absolutely incredible. Again, if you guys like this episode, please make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, follow along with there. Cris is a regular guest on this episode because he knows a lot about a lot. He's one of the smartest people I know. So, hermano, thank you again for your time. Appreciate it. Till next time.
De nada, hermano. It's my pleasure. Thank you for putting all of this together. Until next time.
Thank you for listening to The Sustainable Voice. If you have a success story of your own, please reach out and share it with us. Would love to hear from you. See you next time.